Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views we hope are relevant to you. In today's show, we take a look at how India is beating a rather dangerous geopolitical path as commercial relations between itself and the US sink yet further, with Trump coming into power. All the while as Delhi now starts making overtures into North Korea of all places. Meanwhile, in Punjab, the farmers' protests have most certainly not gone away as fresh protests hit the streets. And in Canada, the RSS provoked yet another outrage with a museum piece claiming once again that false old notion that Sikhs are in fact Hindus. Canadian Sikhs, unsurprisingly, reacting with anger. Well, joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome back for another episode. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your amazing comments that keep pouring in.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And of course, as usual, we will be taking a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, which have been filling it below the video, so thank you as always for those. Right, James, let's get the show on the road. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Donald Trump has set his sights on India this time, and we can look at many other countries, including Brazil and China, Canada, Mexico, in the long list of countries that he wants to impose tariffs. Now he's stating that India charges extremely high tariffs on American-made products or American goods that are imported into that country. He is claiming now that he will retaliate now with tariffs of his own, stating at one point that he will retaliate with basically tariffs on par. So he's claiming that they are approximately 100 to 200% depending on the merchandise. So he is claiming that in response he will levy tariffs of 100 to 200% on Indian items that are imported into the U.S. This is not something new, as we've been listening to Donald Trump talk about tariffs for the last several weeks. It's unclear if these tariffs would be 100 to 200% on top of the 100% tariffs he's threatening for the fact that India is a part of the BRICS system. So potentially, if you hit 200 or 300% tariffs, it's going to have a huge impact on all Americans, not so much the India public. If you look at the trade that's been going on for years, this has been a contentious issue with the U.S. and India relations when it comes to trade for decades. They've been fighting back and forth on American products that are being subject to very high levies in India. And this is something that's been a part of the ongoing negotiations during the Biden administration, and it obviously has really ruffled some feathers in the new coming administration that tends to strike back with some very high tariffs. Now, we know that Trump is also utilizing these tariffs as a negotiating chip in most of the countries that he's targeting. We know that in China, he's looking at improving the trade deals there, that there is a lot to be said for that region, but that the Americans are also looking to form more partnerships in India, such as Apple being very much involved in having more iPhones and Apple products built in India as opposed to China, as those relations teeter. When we look at the tariffs in North America, Trump again, of course, talks about the tariffs on Canada for retaliation to border security and a lax thereof that's allowed almost a doubling of the number of people crossing from Canada to the U.S. in the last several years, and also the same for Mexico. Now, Canada has announced a $1.5 billion increase to border security, but that was in the works before the tariff threats came in. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. Although I do believe personally that that's the government's way of, kind of brushing off Donald Trump, because I don't believe that it was a full $1.5 million before the tariff threats. I think that they've juiced it up since the threats from Donald Trump to appease him and the incoming administration, and to also take more seriously the fentanyl crisis that's really developing around the world. So we'll have to wait and see what it is that India is going to do. Are they going to retaliate on more products with the U.S., or are they going to come down on Indian tariffs? We'll have to wait and see how that plays out in the new world of trade that's coming up, Angus.
Yes, James. Interesting. This Donald Trump is storming into the White House with his typically belligerent style, his typically belligerent negotiating style, which he's obviously used domestically, but he's also very happy to use on the international stage as well. His way of negotiating is always to come out fighting strong, is always to really shock his opponents with his sort of, I would say, his commercial shock and awe strategy, where he'll come out with these outrageously quite terrifying statements if you're another nation that's got such a trading relationship with the United States. But it's always designed. This is his tactic. What he does, he tends to come out with these outrageously extreme views in terms of when he starts a negotiation, and then as it settles down, it tends to push his opponent on the back foot, and then usually they find, shall we say, common ground that is mutually agreeable. But he always tends to come out on the whole on the winning side of a negotiation, because he just wades in so powerfully and belligerently. And I think this is what he's doing with India and actually, in fact, Canada to some degree as well. That's and because, of course, common sense always does tend to prevail. And if we actually look at the facts and figures, India has an awful lot to lose here, because basically, I'll give you some facts and figures. US exports into India last year were $73 billion. But they imported $119 billion worth of goods and services. So there is a huge amount of trade that India potentially will lose to the United States should Trump push with these tariffs. So India really is on the back foot here. And it would appear that Trump is very much in a powerful position to dictate this. Likewise, foreign investment. US foreign investment in India is $52 billion. That's $52 billion of essentially investment in India coming from the United States to help grow and develop India's economy. Turn it the other way around, there is only $3 billion going into the United States from India. So again, the United States occupy by far the most powerful position in this negotiation. So Narendra Modi, whilst on the face of it, will be, standing up and in his usual typical fashion saying, "Oh, we don't care, we're India." In reality, I think he'll be slightly nervous behind the scenes, saying, "Okay, we've got ourselves in a bit of a spot here. We do need to mend relations with Donald Trump, because essentially the Indian economy has an awful lot to lose with this." Now, the other side of all this is the bigger picture. And as you rightly pointed to, James, India is a part of the BRICS economy. It has historic relations with Russia. It has an interesting relationship, let's call it, with China. But it does sit to some degree as an uncomfortable bedfellow with China. Obviously, there have been a lot of tensions, particularly on the borders, etc. But they do sit side by side in the BRICS alignment. And of course, the United States dollar, the US dollar, is essentially the global currency. Oil and many other international commodities are traded in US dollars, which means that the US has this powerful dominant position over global trade. Now, as a result of that, the US's, let's call them enemies, for simple, to use a simple term, the US's enemies are therefore looking for an alternative. Okay, they don't want to be beholden to the power of the US and the US central bank. So they are looking for alternatives. And the BRICS economies, pushed by Putin deliberately, are looking to maybe develop an alternative economy, an alternative international currency that they can trade amongst themselves with. All well and good, but what it does mean is that India may well essentially has to choose sides. Does it want to trade in the dollar, or will it want to trade and use an alternative payment system to the SWIFT system that global trade uses at the moment? Will the BRICS economies develop their own? And if India does align with that, it's moving itself further and further away from one of its biggest markets, and of course its global Western markets, which are so important for India. Likewise, the Indian rupee is not a very strong currency. People don't want, on the international stage, people don't really want rupees. They actually do want US dollars. And likewise, this creates all sorts of difficult trade deficits with India. Now, Russia is doing, I would say, strong commerce with India, and India is very much reliant on Russia. They've got that trade going on with buying Russian oil, which of course India needs to grow its economy. But Russia's finding itself with an awful lot of rupees, which it doesn't really want, because what can it do with rupees apart from spend them in India? So in fact, there's an awful lot of quid pro quo deals going on there behind the scenes between Russia and India in terms of trade deals and what they can essentially exchange services for. But all that aside, I think this does point to the fact that Modi is finding himself in a bit of a corner here, and Trump is pushing him into that corner, and Modi is going to have to start making some very big, key strategic decisions here. Who really should he be aligning with? Yeah, on the face of it, it does appear he's being pushed into the corner alongside Putin, but is that really where India wants to find itself? I suggest probably not. So a lot of pieces in play here, James. I think this is putting Modi in a very interesting and very difficult position.
It is, and we also got to, excuse me, we also have to take a look at what it is that the U.S. is importing, because at the same time, a lot of the manufactured goods that are coming in from China, from India, from Malaysia, and countries to that nature are things that the U.S. either doesn't have the commodity to produce, or they just don't, they just can't compete on a financial ground to make these products at anywhere near the cost that they are importing them for. So again, there is that necessity and the need that he has, that he's promised American families, to bring down the costs of the household budgets and what their expenditures are. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Is it a lot of bluster? I do think it is. I think that there's a lot more bluster than there is in terms of real action that's going to happen. He's using it, as I said, a bargaining chip. If you look at the fact that Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, one of Canada's largest provinces, very simply just said, we'll turn the power off because we do supply over 1.5 million people on the northern border states with electricity. We also have oil that's sent down there. And Doug Ford said, hey, we'll just turn off the power. And to that, Trump just responded, well, I'm really hoping to make a deal with Canada anyway. So he really wasn't concerned. So again, it is very real in terms of the impacts that it could have if he follows through. But whether or not he's willing to go to that extreme, I don't know if it's more than just anything than negotiating power. So that is what we're looking at for those international borders. But let's take a shift to another border, and that is North Korea. Back in July of 2021, the India government did withdraw their ambassador. That would have been Atul Malari Gosterv. And he was withdrawn with all of the other embassy staff out of North Korea. Now, with that said, they exited, they went to Russia and then back to India, but they didn't officially close the embassy. They just didn't staff it. They didn't provide any consular or embassy services. And now it looks like India is making a return, and they're going to reawaken the embassy there in North Korea, which other countries are also looking at doing. Keeping in mind that some of the countries that did withdraw were during the COVID pandemic, so they looked at it as more of a pause, not a withdrawal, as opposed to India, who actually just pulled everybody out and they didn't have any firm plans to reopen. And now it seems as though it is. So that's really interesting to watch how the international fields are playing and how it's shifting so dynamically. And the question is this a favor to Putin? Is it something to do with the fact that Korea is supplying military aid and soldiers to Russia, and Russia is calling in favors back to India, saying, hey, you want to use our media services, you want to use this, you want to keep sending us oil so that we're buying, which really benefits Russia more than it does India, but at the same time, it is a mutually beneficial agreement. So now they are looking to step back into the diplomatic array when it comes to having that posting in Pyongyang. Now, as I said, a lot of other countries are doing the same, but where this is different is that they've pretty much maxed out the opportunities that they have with South Korea, and they are looking to really get more of a foothold in North Korea to be able to keep an eye on that entire region. Now, keeping in mind that with that said, it could cause some friction between India and South Korea. So it's really a balancing act that India is taking on, not only here, but it's the same as we see between India's maneuvering between the U.S. and China and Russia, where they really seem to be playing every inch of the field here, that they are not loyal to anyone. They are loyal to themselves and the benefit to their nation. And I can't blame them for that. But what I will say is that, the really important part is, what is the end game for North Korea? What are the advantages that they are going to have in terms of, or what are they hoping to get out of having all of these embassies reopen and increase trade talks, when there are still a lot of embargoes and blockades on products coming in and out of North Korea, when it comes to trade embargoes, when it comes to other restrictions given the regime that's in place there. And, maybe it's Modi and Kim Jong-un will get along well because they like to really keep their thumb to oppress their people, to really go after minorities, and to cause havoc when it comes to international human rights issues within their borders. So again, we'll have to wait and see how that works out. What is the strategic advantage for all parties involved? But I personally am questioning the Russia connection in terms of the reopening of the embassy for India, because I don't see Russia doing that too soon to get their people back in on a mass level. But instead, by proxy, they will use India to gather intelligence and to exploit that market as well. Don't get me wrong. Of course, we know that there is trade going on between North Korea and Russia, but I think that this is another way to kind of play the game. If you're looking here, you're missing there, you're missing there. If you're looking here, and that's what it's all about. It's about shuffling of attention on the international diplomatic scene and on the human rights scene. So again, we'll have to wait and see how New Delhi's presence plays out in the replacement and reawakening of that embassy, Angus.
Yeah, I suppose to read into this story, what does it actually mean? It's very hard really to understand. I mean, on the face of it, it could literally just be absolutely nothing. It could be a non-story. It could be we're just reopening an embassy that we closed a few years ago. But in reality, nothing happens really without usually an underlying agenda there, and it's likely, as you say, there are all sorts of interesting links with North Korea and Russia. Of course, we have reported that Russia has been using North Korean troops in its fight in Ukraine. And India itself, well, India, of course, as we know, has been aligning with Russia, or has aligned with Russia for many years. And India, of course, is also looking for friends on the global stage. It is looking for other nations to align with and ally with, because it's finding itself to some degree, as we just talked about, becoming a little bit more isolated from the West. The West is trying to seduce India as an ally, but India seems to be taking a bit of a more backward step and looking more, as I said, to the BRICS economies. And North Korea, it sort of probably falls more naturally in alignment with the BRICS economies than any other economies. And of course, China fits into this weird sort of jigsaw as well, because North Korea is sitting on the border with China. China, as I mentioned earlier, China and India have quite a fractious relationship. On some levels, they're obviously sort of working together, but on other levels, there is quite a lot of tension. And they're also eyeing the future, because they are the two world superpowers to be probably over the next 20, 30 years. And we've reported again regularly how China strategically has been encircling India with its own, on the face of it, with its civilian commercial reach. It's taking hold of bases, naval bases or maritime bases around the Indian Ocean, essentially as a staging post to encircle India strategically. So one wonders if likewise India is now fighting back a bit, because of course North Korea sits very strategically on the eastern side of China, and if India builds up an alliance with North Korea, then suddenly India actually has a staging post almost on the east coast of China. So again, strategically, it could be another interesting piece in that sort of geopolitical jigsaw. And not forgetting also, India is of course a nuclear power. Russia is a nuclear power. North Korea is a wannabe nuclear power. North Korea is desperate to get its hands on nuclear weapons, if it hasn't already. And of course, the West are keeping a very, very close eye on North Korea. The West really don't want North Korea to get its hands on nuclear weapons, and particularly nuclear weapons that could reach essentially the west coast of the United States. That would be a pretty interesting scenario. So there's a lot of pieces, a lot of variables in this equation. Where they will all sit and on which side of that equation, we don't know yet. I think it's clearly there are strategic groups are huddled round tables in Delhi and probably in Moscow at this very moment, just trying to work out, okay, how does North Korea and how will North Korea sit in this great jigsaw of the area, and looking forward probably 10, 20, 30 years time. I don't know, but James, I think this is it may amount to something, or it may amount to nothing, but it's something that I think we'll just have to keep a close eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you stated, I mean, it's obvious that India is looking to increase their exports and other trade with countries in the region, but around the globe. And again, this is another opportunity, although there may not be a huge opportunity at this time in terms of the trading back and forth. I definitely think that they could be looking to expand that. And they will take it wherever they can get it because, it may be a bunch of small markets, but at the end of the day, they all add up. You take into account countries like Azerbaijan, who has historically basically denounced India's products in terms of military equipment as low grade or secondary equipment. And, they have always put down the Indian made military equipment. But now, given the geopolitical situation and the tensions within the region, they're actually looking at buying Indian made military equipment because of the fact that they are feeling pressured that they need to upkeep or uptake their military defense systems and their equipment. So it's interesting to see how India is still just really working every part of the world. They are definitely not proud to say, we don't care who we deal with, we don't care what the trade's going to be, we're just going to make it happen.
Indeed, and as we've often reported, India just looks after its own interests. It's deliberately tried not to align with West or East or whatever. It just cherry picks its allies as it needs to on every particular issue. But as we often say, one day it probably is going to have to choose sides, as they say. So we will see. Okay, James, let's move on and let's move to Punjab. And we've often talked about the farmers' protests, and unsurprisingly, the farmers' protests still rumble on. They have not gone away, despite mainstream Indian media deliberately trying to ignore it. And it's very rare that the protests are reported in the Indian media, but they really are rumbling on. And the Punjabi farmers have been out in the streets pretty much all year. And it still comes back to that same old issue that kicked off the 2020-2021 protests, and this minimum support price issue. And again, we mentioned it yesterday. And it does appear that it's really reached another crescendo over the last few days, because there have been yet more warlike scenes, as it's been reported, erupting this week as the mainly Sikh Punjabi-led forces, I use that term deliberately, face tear gas once again and water cannons once again. Yeah, the police and the army are out there in force, really giving it full force against this essentially democratic protest. And so they've faced tear gas, water cannons and a larger, wider police presence, and the police have been quite violent in their reactions, trying to prevent a third attempt for a march on Delhi. And if you remember, earlier this year, the farmers tried very hard to march upon Delhi, and they met a wall of police, armed with just about everything short of machine guns. And these huge barriers blocking their way into Delhi. So they tried for a third time to march on Delhi. Now, of course, they are protesting against the government, who have yet again broken their promises. These were promises that they made after the 2020-2021 farmers' protests. And it comes back to these basic issues such as appropriate implementation of this minimum support pricing. And as we reported yesterday, of course, the protests are essentially about these black laws, as they call them, these laws that Modi brought in saying, oh, look, it's better for the industry. And in fact, the farmers are saying, no, it is not. All you're doing is you're essentially going to put small farmers out of business, which means those farms will then be hoovered up by big corporate business, big corporate farmers. And therefore, the accusation is once again that Modi's lining his friends' pockets at the expense of Punjab's small farms. So, at the protests, effigies once again of Prime Minister Modi were later burned as groups across India mimicked Punjab agitations and displays of support. So, of course, right across India now, even more farmers are coming out in support of Punjab's farmers. So they're all sticking together to send Modi a very clear message. Further civil disobedience is planned, including another march to Delhi. So yeah, once again, this is not going away. I don't think Mr. Modi realises just the depth of feeling that is spreading, certainly not just through Punjab, but across the whole of India, that the farmers are just getting a bit tired of this, that the central government are not listening. So civil disobedience is planned right across India just to send this message loud and clear to Delhi. Now, unfortunately, one of the farmers' leaders, Jagjit Singh Dhaliwal, has gone on hunger strike. Yes, this is the method that so many Punjabis have had to sadly resort to. We've seen it on so many issues, not least recently with Amritpal Singh still residing in jail in Dibrugarh jail, where some of his supporters had to go on hunger strike in support of him. Well, once again, hunger strike is being used for the farmers' protest, and it's an elderly gentleman, Jagjit Singh Dhaliwal. He's gone on hunger strike, and what's happened in the past, and this is quite shocking, is that in similar situations, the Indian authorities have actually just arrested and forced fed activists like Mr. Singh Dhaliwal. And his health is steadily deteriorating, it's reported. Tensions are continuing to rise as a result in the Punjab and beyond. And farmers are once again putting their lives on the line to basically fight for their livelihoods. Now, Jagjit Singh Dhaliwal, he's 70 years old. Today is his 23rd day of hunger strike, so he's been going for over 3 weeks now. And he's hunger striking at the Kanuri border, demanding a legal MSP guarantee. And despite his worsening health, he refuses treatment, vowing to sacrifice his life for farmers' rights. And doctors have checked on him recently. His hunger strike has entered its 23rd day, as I've said. They have recommended immediate hospitalisation due to his deteriorating health. He has refused any medical treatment. He has said this is a fast unto death. So basically, this is it for him. He's saying, look, I'm going to die for my principles. He's actually, believe it or not, also a cancer patient. So he's already unwell. He's seriously ill, this guy. And he's now gone into a fast unto death just to highlight the plight of the Punjabi farmers. And Punjab Congress president, so the local president of the local Congress party, that's the opposition party, and MP Amrinder Singh Raja Waring said a couple of days ago he visited Jagjit Singh Dhaliwal on what was his 21st day. And Waring described Dhaliwal's fight as one for all Punjabis and a testament to the relentless spirit of farmers who are the backbone of the nation, and lashed out at central government for its indifferent attitude towards farmers' demands, calling the treatment of the farmers condemnable. He said Congress has always stood with farmers and their brothers and will continue to do so. Waring emphasised how the issue has been consistently raised in Parliament and added that Congress leader Rahul Gandhi has and will continue to amplify the farmers' voice on national platforms. Well, I'm going to have to raise a slightly cynical eyebrow there. I mean, of course, this is a lot of political speak from the Congress Party. Congress Party are now in official opposition. The Congress Party and the local Congress leader is saying, we stand with the farmers. Absolutely, you should. And of course, it is the job of the Congress, of the opposition, to raise the voice of the farmers with Modi's BJP in power. But again, I'm slightly cynical when I hear this. It is very political language. Well, what are you doing about it? I mean, it's all very well raising it in the Lok Sabha, but I don't see any results. You know, it's having no effect, and it's now forcing people like Mr. Dhaliwal, Singh Dhaliwal, to go on fast unto death. That is the only way that anything seems to ever happen in India, is literally people risk their lives. And once again, we just look at the bigger picture. This is 4 years almost continuously of Punjab's farmers having to protest because central government will just not listen to them. We're now into 4 years almost continuous protests, where several farmers have had to go on hunger strike. Several farmers have actually lost their lives protesting. We've seen thousands, tens of thousands of people take to the streets in what has turned into violent protests because they have been met with water cannon, with tear gas, drones dropping tear gas onto them. We've seen armed police. We've had reports of at least one farmer shot in the head with a live round by police in the protests early this year. We've seen the most terrible violence being meted out against the protesters. And yet, here we are all these years later and nothing still has been done. Modi is deaf. Modi's BJP is absolutely deaf. He promised them. He made promises to the farmers when they became so powerful and the protests threatened to spread right across India. Finally, Modi gave in, made all these promises to quieten those voices. And what did he do? He went and reneged on those promises once again. Yep, what a surprise. A politician reneged on his promises. So here we are again. So is Modi going to make more promises? Do we believe those promises? I don't know. All I know is that Punjabi's farmers have had once again no choice but to take to the streets and try and march on Delhi. This is democracy in action. Punjabi democracy is being met with bullets, with tear gas, and with lines of police. This is democracy in India writ large, James. It's once again, here we are again.
Yeah, and we know that, those who start to get too much attention or, their voices get too loud for Modi's ears, and I don't mean his physical ones, but when he is being drowned out in the message around the world, especially when it comes to their handling of the farmer protests and the human rights, the right for people to peacefully assemble. These are things that are taken for granted in the Western world that are not necessarily respected in countries like India. And we have seen so many people that have lost their lives or their livelihoods as a result of the treatment of the Punjabi farmers. And this is just another way that Modi's going to make promises and wait for the international attention to draw down and then turn his back on the farmers yet once again, because he's shown his true colors. We've seen it time and time again where he makes promises, never follows through, and it is at the cost of these farmers who have been there for generations, just trying to eke out a living and support their families and make something better for the future. And that's what Modi should be focused on, is the betterment of the Punjab and the entire country and its people for the future, and to stop suppressing the opportunities that have been there for decades and, as I said, for generations when it comes to the farmers. They are not a risk to Modi, but he sure treats them as though they are.
Indeed. And of course, the root cause of all this, interestingly, is also now reflected in the West, in fact, to an increasingly large degree, is it's corporate greed. It's greed and control. The food chain in traditional times has been essentially fed by the small farmer, the millions of small farmers around the world. But it's these giant agricultural industrial corporations, of course, run by billionaires and owned by billionaires. They are taking slow but sure control of the global food chain. And this is happening in India, aided and abetted by the Modi regime. Of course, it's his billionaire mates who control and own these big corporate farming machines, let's call them. And they are hoovering up the small farms because they want the land, they want control of the food chain, because of course we all need to eat. If there are no farms, there's no food. And they want control of the food chain because they know that we all have to eat, we all have to buy food. So of course, if they control the food chain, they've got guaranteed, it's guaranteed revenue forevermore. And it's all about money and control, sadly. So Punjab's farms are reflecting the same issues here in the West, certainly here in the UK and Europe. Small farmers are fighting a similar battle against the corporate farmers, the corporate billionaires, the industrial scale farmers who are hoovering up the small farms so they can take control of the food chain for their own profits. That's the same battle that is playing out right across the globe as we speak. So.
Absolutely, Angus, and we're seeing a lot of the farm associations, whether it is the produce, whether it is the apple farmers and so forth. We've seen the collapse of several of these associations here in Canada. And if any of our viewers are interested to see how crazy the Canadians can get when it comes to protecting farmers' rights, take a look at the history of the maple syrup industry in Eastern Canada. And there's actually a new series on one of the streaming platforms that makes fun of that system, because there was actually a multi-million-dollar heist of the maple syrup reserves several years ago in Canada. The maple syrup heist. But seriously, take a look at the Maple Syrup Industry Association, and it was run like a cartel. So if you don't think that there's money to be had, that's why these corporations want to break down these trade associations, the farmer associations, get their hands on the property, because let's face it, that $3 head of lettuce today, they can jack up to $5 because they'll have the control, and you have no choice.
Indeed. Let's move on, James, to my second story. And I'm going to jump over the Atlantic to your neck of the woods, actually. And this is an interesting story that's just hit social media just over the last day or so. And this is the Hindu Swayamsevak Sangh, the HSS in Canada, have really upset the local Sikh population in Surrey, because they, as an organisation, they are basically known as just yet another outlet of the RSS based in Canada.
Right.
They're a bit like the Hindu Forum of Canada and south of the border, the CONA, the COHNA, the Coalition of Hindus of North America. These are all these organisations that are essentially funded and resourced and operated by the RSS as an extension of the Indian RSS to spread their agenda across North America. And the HSS in Surrey, they've set up a display at a museum in Surrey, making the claim, as it's reported, an anti-Sikh claim that Sikhi is a Hindu tradition, including the suggestion that the Sri Guru Granth Sahib Ji is, as they call it, a Hindu manuscript. And as it's reported, the HSS is the international branch of the RSS, an extremist Hindu nationalist body. Was it reported? Yes, it's just another organisation representing the RSS agenda. Now, this comes back to something that we talk a lot about, particularly in our comment sections. This old trope that the RSS and Hindutva try to trot out on a regular basis is that Sikhs are Hindus. And we see this comment right across social media. And it's a very deliberate tactic that the RSS use as part of because they are terrified of the Sikh community. The Brahmins are terrified of the Sikh community and have been since the days of partition, because as we often refer to the fact that the Sikh community is the greatest threat to Brahmanical dominance and control of India. They are the community that recognise what's going on in India, recognise it from day one, and they have the power and certainly the resources and the will to stand up to what's going on and to highlight to the rest of India what is going on in India. And of course, they are threatening to break away, to secede from India in the form of Khalistan. So as a result, the RSS and the Brahmins have got this obsessive agenda to try and destroy the Sikh community, to try and destroy the whole Khalistan movement because of this threat that they perceive it holds for their dominance and control. Right. And so one of their key foundations to undermine and to destroy the Sikh community is to try and engender this belief that actually Sikhs are Hindus. You're not a separate people. You're part of us. We're all one and the same. We're all part of the same nation. That Sikhs, really, you're all just Hindus. You don't realise it, but you're all part of our religion. Now, it's a very insidious argument. It's a very dangerous argument, and it's a completely false argument. So this display at this Surrey Museum is part of this agenda to try and spread to the global community this message that Sikhs aren't really a separate independent religion. They're actually Hindus, believe it or not. Of course they're not. Now, unsurprisingly, the local Sikh community has hit back in absolute outrage. Gurpreet Kaur, she's the WSO president for British Columbia, that's the World Sikh Organisation, president for British Columbia, stated in a press release when she saw this, "We are deeply disappointed that the Darshana exhibition has been displayed at the Museum of Surrey with the support of the province of BC. This exhibition, organised by a Hindutva-linked organisation, falsely claims that Sikhs are Hindus and that Sikhi is merely a branch of Hinduism. This is a direct example of the extremist Hindutva agenda, which seeks to erase minority communities in India to create a Hindu Rashtra. That this offensive exhibit was displayed in Surrey, that's the home, of course, as you know, James, to a significant Sikh population, is even more concerning. The exhibition is deeply hurtful and must be removed immediately. We demand transparency and accountability as to how such an offensive exhibition was approved. Now, I probably have to say in defence of the museum, they probably are not aware of the complexities and the subtleties and the nuances of Indian religious politics. So they might be the innocent party in all this, and they've been a bit of a victim of the RSS agenda. Now, on social media, of course, there were when this hit social media, there was a tsunami of comments on both sides of the argument. Of course, the Hindutva IT cells were in there straight away, saying, "Well, of course, all Sikhs are Hindus. It's written in the Holy Scriptures." And it says that there's references to the Hindu religion all the way through the Holy Scriptures, and etc. etc. So the IT cells were in there straight away supporting this whole false premise. But of course, on the other side, the Sikh community was saying, no, this is absolutely outrageous. It is offensive, and you are totally wrong. And I'll quickly rush through one of the responses. This came from Wanjara Nomad Collections team. And they, again, another organisation who sit on they collect, as they say, the tapestry of Sikh history, heritage and home. So they are, again, an organisation that protects the heritage and the cultural identity of the Sikh community. And they said that they applaud the Sikh community for standing up against this. And they call this exhibition as misleading and harmful. It goes beyond merely misrepresenting facts. It actively seeks to disconnect Sikh Canadians from their ancestral roots. It distorts their history and falsely categorises them as Hindus. By doing so, it strips away the stories, the values, traditions at the heart of these identities. We've seen similar tactics before, in Burnaby, hidden behind an anti-caste banner, and at the Sikh Heritage Museum in Abbotsford, where mistranslations falsely depicted Sikh Punjabis as morally degraded. These actions are no coincidence. They are calculated efforts to distort, to weaken and to mould thriving identities into forms that are easier to manipulate and control. So they've got it absolutely bang on. They know what's going on here. They see this as yet another extension of this RSS Hindutva plan to manipulate and distort the truth to match this RSS agenda. They also refer to this racist term South Asian. Now, of course, we come across this term quite regularly. What does a South Asian actually mean? Well, they say it stands as one of these tools of erasure. It's not a neutral phrase. It's deliberately prejudiced to flatten the rich diversity of Sikh, Punjabi and other distinct groups into a hollow, meaningless label. Yeah, I would agree with this. Quite often we see this term South Asian. What on earth is South Asia? What is a South Asian? Now, geographically, it covers an enormous area that covers so many different diverse cultures and identities. And it's deliberately spread actually by Hindutva because it deliberately suppresses the Sikhi, the Punjabi culture. It throws them all into this melting pot and therefore dilutes what actually Sikhi represents as an independent and as a diverse culture, as a separate culture. And they talk about this term South Asian, endorsed by grant-driven opportunists. Indeed, yes, these are people funded indirectly and directly by the RSS to spread this agenda. That they term the grant mafia. Interesting term. Academia has been infiltrated and resourced and funded by Hindutva and the RSS to spread this false premise. And they're finding this grant mafia, as they call it, spreading this false premise that, again, Sikhs are Hindus. This approach values power and profit above truth and respect, as they say, rightly so. As proud Sikh Canadians, we refuse to see our heritage, our history and our values reduced to mere catchphrases or traded as assets for political and financial gain. Our legacy is not up for sale. Initiatives like the Darshana exhibition and labels like South Asian are part of a broader attempt to sever us from our origins and identity. Indeed. Let it be understood our identities are sacred, nurtured by generations past and fortified by the resilience of our communities. To attempt to sever these roots only summons a response honed over centuries. We do not resist out of mere stubbornness, but out of obligation to those who came before us and those who will follow. Very powerful words, and I think sums up beautifully what's going on here. It was just a small exhibition, but it forms part of a bigger, wider agenda designed to stamp down on Sikh identity, because they fear Sikhs, they fear the community, they fear the whole Khalistan movement, because they know it stands as an existential threat to their control of India, to their control of the Punjab, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And this museum is actually about 10 minutes from where I live. And I didn't realize that they had this going on, but it's definitely something I'll look into. If it's still going on over the weekend, I'll try to get down there and get some footage and see if we can see some of the examples of the ignorance that's happening within this this show, I guess you could call it. And something else that I found very interesting in that article, Angus, is about the term South Asian. That is a term that's actually very common here in Canada. And whether it is throughout the various communities that are located, the many countries and ethnic groups that are represented by that group. Even when we did the story a few months back on the new museum, it is currently just a working name of the South Asian Canadian, Historical Museum or whatever it was. So again, that's something that I've just learned myself from this article, is that it is not a welcome term, and that's something, as I said, it's a very common term here in Canada that I've just been educated on.
Indeed, likewise. And it'll be interesting to see if what the museum's reaction is to this. I've seen no reports of of any announcement from the museum itself. But it'll be interesting to see if they've got anything to say about this. As I say, I suspect they're probably a bit of an innocent victim of this. They probably didn't realise the upset that they've caused. So anyway, we'll follow that one. But in the meantime, let's move on to our comment section. Loads of comments that have come in over our last few stories. And when we talked about police targeting Sikhs, particularly here in the UK, this did actually raise an awful lot of comments, and a lot of people come out in support of with their own stories of what's happened here in the UK. And Amar Kaira said, and this is quite an interesting one, I heard even travel agencies in the UK are asking these kind of questions before booking a holiday. This refers to the Sikhs being questioned by the police, obviously, when they travel, about seemingly unrelated things. What are your opinions of Khalistan? What are your opinions of partition? These things, as a Sikh, why on earth is it the police's business what your opinion is of situations like that? And what Amar Kaira is saying, and I find this quite concerning, I don't know if this is true, is that even travel agencies are asking Sikhs these sorts of questions. I do find it hard to believe, and if this is true, I really want to know more about this, because to be honest, I'm sure the average travel agent in the UK doesn't even have a clue about Indian politics, never mind things about Khalistan or whatever. So if it is true, it's quite concerning. But anyway, I would say thank you to that commenter for that one. Let us know more if there's any more evidence of that. But 5 Stars then goes on and extends this and said the UK has always been cruel on Sikhs. And it really does reflect something that I've talked a lot about, certainly in recent times, about why on earth is the British establishment so down on the Sikh community. And this is one of our communities that has actually been one of our most disproportionately contributing communities in the UK. They're not only integrated, they have contributed massively to our nation, commercially, culturally, everything. The armed forces, I mean, in law enforcement, in our emergency services, they're everywhere. Contributing in such an enormous level. So why on earth is the UK or the establishment so hard on the Sikh community? I don't know is the answer. And as I said, there has been this collusion, again, which I've reported on regularly, this collusion between the British establishment and the Indian establishment, certainly over Jagtar Singh, Joe Hallam, so many other issues. We talked about the West Midlands and the raids that went on in the West Midlands in 2017, 2018. And actually, I'll just quickly jump to, and I'll just highlight something going on. We reported on the story of Deepa Singh. He's Sikh Youth UK. He's reports on the story where he and his sister were sentenced. So not sentenced yet; they are about to be sentenced, but they were found guilty of breaking the Charity Commission's regulations of all things. But essentially, it's been a case that's been going on since 2017. Where the British police, the British establishment, have very clearly targeted Sikh Youth UK. Again, it's an activist organisation. They've been very closely allied with the Jagtar Singh Johal case. They've campaigned massively in support of Jaggi, to free Jaggi. And as a result, they found themselves at the receiving end of the British establishment trying to bring them down. And there's been this legal case against Deepa Singh and his sister. They were found guilty of fraud, essentially, which on the face of it seemed an open and shut case. But you dig deeper, and actually it wasn't. There was all sorts of legal I would say ambiguities that went on. It very clearly stood as a case of the British establishment doing anything in its power to close down Sikh Youth UK. And Deepa Singh has been essentially on the receiving end of this, and his sister, and they were found guilty in Birmingham Crown Court, and they are due to be sentenced. They were due to be sentenced actually a couple of weeks ago. It was delayed and delayed. They were only told that literally the last minute their sentencing will be delayed, and for some reason they've been strung along. And I'm jumping to this just to highlight the fact that I believe it is the 9th of January, and Deepa Singh has actually called for all his supporters to attend Birmingham Crown Court on the 9th of January in support of him. And he actually says, please continue with your japs and ardas, that's prayers. We will keep you updated with any events leading up to this date, and encourage everyone to start organising for the 9th of January when he will and his sister will be sentenced for the crimes that they question why they were found guilty of. And it was called Operation Takuma. It began in 2018, and unfortunately now they will face sentencing on the 9th of January. So I'm just bringing that up again just as a side note, but just to highlight, James, for some bizarre reason, the British establishment has really got it in for the British Sikh community, for certainly Sikh activists, and most definitely Khalistani activists here in the UK, which contrasts very strongly with what's going on in Canada.
Absolutely, and it's something that is very interesting to look at in terms of geographical positioning and the activities that are going on, because in the UK there is a lot more activity to try and bridge gaps with the India government, with the BJP, the RSS, in the name of increased trade, whereas in Canada, we're a bit further away from that in terms of increasing trade, because we have been standing up to them and calling them out on their transnational repression. So I think that may have something to do with the fact that India is definitely in the RSS. They are making inroads into targeting the Sikhs of the UK.
Indeed, and let's move on to the whole subject of Khalistan, which obviously features regularly on our show. Harnak Singh Khalsa talks about the benefits of Khalistan. Democracy, humanity and equality is the cornerstone of Khalistan. We do talk about this a lot. Just look at the Golden Temple as an example. All faiths are allowed in. The Sikh service to all during the COVID is another example. Not just during COVID. Of course, every time there is a natural disaster, who are there at the front line? It is always Sikh charitable organisations. So we often talk, James, do we not, about how the Sikh community contributes so much, how that the whole establishment of Khalistan is designed not to be exclusively Sikh. It is designed for all faiths, all backgrounds, all cultures, all creeds are welcome. Again, it's all about the benefits of Khalistan and the benefits of Sikhi, as many of our commenters regularly point out and say on a daily basis, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And you go to a Gurdwara, and when you're on the property, they don't chase you off. They try to chase you in. Come in and have something hot to drink to warm up. Come in, there's food ready. They don't chase people off. They welcome everybody inside and treat them like family.
Indeed, and having enjoyed Langar at a Gurdwara in Phoenix, Arizona, I can testify myself to the extraordinarily warm welcome that I was given, even as a non-Sikh, into the Gurdwara. So, and that of course you find in every Gurdwara around the world. Now, TC8410 takes this a step further. Khalistan is badly needed for mankind as a whole. I think you're absolutely right. I think everybody wins with Khalistan. The human rights record is grim. It absolutely is. In India particularly, it's in urgent need of transformation. And what's really tragic is that this is not realised by all. And furthermore, if there is doubt about whether the people of Punjab want this, bring on the Khalistan referendum. We say that on a regular basis. What is India afraid of? We know what they're afraid of, don't we, James?
Oh, we certainly do. And that's something that we'll have to watch and see what happens with Modi in the next election. It's a few years away, but let's see what the next government's going to say when it comes to Khalistan, saying, let's have a referendum. Let's make this a real democracy.
We will continue to campaign for that very referendum. Now, James, a little bit light on Critics' Corner today for some reason. But we've got a cracker from Nativity who says, and I'm going to use the word he uses because it's quite rude, says, you think that bleep you utter for a few bucks from, and I'm sure this is a rude word in Punjabi or Hindi, I don't know, you think just the rubbish you utter for a few bucks from Khalistan is the truth? Well, yes, it is actually. I am, however, happy for you that at least you have a job to feed your family. Well, so are we, thank you. Khalistanis will not get anything, but at least you get paid. Well, I think Khalistanis, their reward will be Khalistan. When Khalistan is established, that is the reward, the only reward that they need. That is the only reward that we actually would need. As we often say, James, we will be delighted to celebrate on that first day of the establishment of Khalistan. We will be there, God willing, in Khalistan, broadcasting our show as part of the Khalistan Broadcasting Corporation. We will be there broadcasting. We'll even do that show for free, James.
Absolutely, and look forward to every moment of it.
So thank you, Nativity, for being the sole contributor to Critics' Corner today. Now here's an interesting one. Here's one I thought was going to land very squarely in Critics' Corner. I love this comment. This is from 5AAB. You evil racist Canadians killing Indian students. Why do you have so much hate of Indians? You should be like us Hindus, with love and respect. Not only humans, but animals as well. Come and see how we treat our cows, who are treated like humans. There's not one rape, murder, assault or molestation in at least the last 365 seconds. And that's where the comment starts making sense. That's how countries should be. Safe, we Indian women. Just look at our history, our places of worship, our Mother Durga, etc., etc. You Westerners falsely accuse Modi of being some sort of monster. Ask any national media anchor. Our media is totally free from censorship, as long as they don't report anything related to Hindus. So leave our PM, who is Vishnu incarnate, etc., etc. And it goes on. And please stop it, sob, sob. So, of course, a wonderfully tongue-in-cheek comment, as we say there, James. I think basically raising the wonderful hypocrisy of the Indian media there.
Absolutely. And I mean, killing of Indian students. Well, there was, unfortunate deaths recently. One of them was a mutual fight between roommates where they got into a fight and the person was defending himself. He grabbed a knife and never should have, and he will face the full extent of the law. You've got these two scumbags who killed a defenseless security guard, and he was a student. Yes, I agree. There's absolutely no place in Canada for that. But the other one that people are calling a violent, hate-motivated death was a tree fell on a young lady. As tragic as that is, it's not that the tree had ulterior motives. It's a tree. So yeah, as tragic as it is, we don't have violent trees in Canada.
Yeah, and I'll just, again, pick up one point in this, which actually is so pertinent. There's not one rape, murder, assault or molestation in the last, well, as you jokingly say, 365 seconds. But that's the problem with India, is how often, James, have we had to report on rapes and murders, assaults, molestations? It's, the sexual assault issue in India is absolutely shameful. I forget the statistic now, how often, how I think there's a rape every, whatever it is, minutes in India. It's just unbelievable. And Indian society is up in arms and has taken to the streets on a regular basis, saying you've got to do something about this dreadful problem that is so particular to India, this sexual assaults of women. Women are treated so poorly in India. It is as I say, James, it's a tragedy and it's disgusting. The Indian government just cannot get a grip on it and will not get a grip on it.
Absolutely, Angus. It's something that we've been reporting on for a long time, and this has to stop. And the scary part is that there is a rape going on in India every several minutes, but the majority of rapes are not reported. So it could be as much as several rapes a minute going on from around the entire country. We don't know because so many go unreported, and the victims never get the help that they deserve.
Indeed. And in fact, people took to the streets only recently, only because a female doctor, was raped and murdered in the hospital. But as you rightly say, people took to the streets because it was let's say, a higher ranking person of society. It was a doctor. But all the Dalits, for example, you think of the Dalit women who are probably sexually assaulted on a daily basis. Nobody takes to the streets for them. If you're lower caste, nobody cares in India. That's, again, a shocking indictment of Indian society. So anyway, let's move on, because that's a big subject we could talk a lot about. You are Master. Now, again, we're talking about how the Sikhs were detained by British police and interrogated. And you are Master says, I've never heard of any Muslims saying the police pull them up in airports and asking them views on Islam and jihadis. But they are pulling up Sikhs and asking them their views on Sikh religion, partition, etc., etc. So I think the point here that you're raising is why aren't Muslims treated in the same way? I would actually probably answer that and say, actually, I think they are. They are to some degree. And this is where, certainly, and this is particularly in the UK, I don't know if it's the same in Canada, James, but the police have been often accused of being very hands-off with our Muslim community because they're afraid of being accused of being racist. We've had terrible issues of grooming gangs, as they're called, in the north of England. Well, talking about sexual assault. Young girls in the north of England have been groomed by Muslim gangs who've been they've been grooming young girls, underage girls, for sexual assault. And the police have been accused and have actually been found to have not investigated these cases properly because they have literally been afraid of being accused of being racist for targeting the Muslim community. So they've deliberately not investigated it, which means these grooming gangs have got away with it. In fact, there are many Sikh activists who have been very active in pointing out what's been going on in the Muslim community. And people have turned on these Sikhs here in the UK for highlighting this very thing. It's a very dangerous area to get involved in because it always raises up this spectre, this accusation of racism. And so likewise, and I think you are Master, your comment here actually touches on this very same issue, is that the police are a lot more hands-off with Muslims. Clearly they're not afraid of detaining Sikhs whenever they want. With Muslims, they're a lot more careful how they deal with Muslims because of this very same issue. And then you also then talk about the Air India issue. I don't believe Sikhs were behind Air India. Neither do we. We talk about that regularly. And etc. etc. And then you go on to say, we thought it was only the Conservative government who were acting against Sikhs, but clearly Labour are the same. They made us all sorts of promises and they seem to be reneging on those promises. Yeah, and again, I've raised this regularly myself. I've been very cynical. The Conservative government clearly were just all mouth and no action when it came to the Sikh community. They did absolutely nothing about Jagtar Singh Johal. And clearly they've done absolutely nothing for the Sikh community here in the UK. But when the Labour government took power in July, with great fanfare, and in fact many high-level Sikhs in our community in the UK said, great, now we're going to see some action. They were very optimistic. They felt that Starmer would take a lot of action. I raise a cynical eyebrow, as I always have done. I always say, well, judge them by the results. And as you rightly said, well, we're waiting for results. Don't see many results so far, but we'll wait and see, James. I think our politicians here are probably like your politicians, James. There's an awful lot of talk, but very little action.
That sounds very familiar.
Doesn't it just? And 5AAB also makes a comment to say the Sikhs who are stopped by British police should take their name, rank and number and report them to the local MPs, etc. I think great in theory. I think in practice, probably nothing will be done. No harm in doing it, but ultimately you've also got to, I think, understand that many of the police on the front line are only doing their job. It's higher up that this issue is. The people that need to be targeted are the senior officers, the decision makers, the management. They're the ones enacting the policy. They are the ones creating and interpreting policy from the government itself or the establishment. Right. So it's this chain of command. Those on the front line are just doing as they're told. It's the people higher up the chain, I think, that are the issue. So if you're reporting to higher up the chain, you're asking the police to police themselves. I don't think it'd probably have any effect. I think, sadly, that's the reality, James.
Absolutely. I do believe that you're absolutely right there, Angus, that it's systemic. It goes up much higher than the frontline staff.
Yeah, sadly. We talk about the water issue, the black water of the Punjab and the pollution, the dreadful pollution. And SSI Singh says in Satluj once the water was purified. I'm sure it was. I'm sure years ago, before industry, and certainly before the dye industry got involved in the Punjab, I bet those rivers flowed beautifully. And of course, they drain the Himalayas. So, of course, you got some of the most purest, most beautiful, actually some of the most healthiest water on the planet flowing out of the Himalayas through the Punjab. And now look at the state of it, the colour of it. You saw the videos in yesterday's show. It was black. And the government has done absolutely nothing about it, has it, James?
Exactly. And there are a lot of treatment facilities that they could force industry to fund, but they're not doing it.
Always down to profit. Always comes back down to profit.
That's right.
And our last page of comments. Curials says, thanks again. Well, thank you for your comment. India needs to be kept an eye on. Absolutely right. I don't think we can sum it up any better. It needs more than an eye keeping on it, James, does it not?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But then again, what government doesn't need to be kept an eye on?
Actually, you're right there. I think our very own governments need to be kept an eye on. They need to be held accountable because clearly the Indian government seems to be running out of control. There's not much account being held of the Indian government. And Latwinder Singh says, well, thank you for your, thank you both of you. God bless you and your family, and the same to you, Latwinder. Why not show on your channel a thanks button? Well, I don't know about a thanks button, but we certainly, if you look in our description, we have all sorts of our link tree. And as regular viewers, I know I'm no great technical whiz about these things, but I do know there is something called a link tree in our description. If you click on that link, you can see all sorts of clever things that link to our Facebook, our Instagram, and all our presence online, and ways that you can donate, James. And do you know anything about a thank you button, or is it all about donations, James?
Yeah, it is a part of the monetization program that we've lost monetization on the channel, so the thanks button disappeared. But again, you can always show your appreciation by following the link tree and making a small contribution to the channel through the links that are on the link tree.
Indeed. So thank you for our audience and your support, and particularly your financial support for those who have donated. It's been very much appreciated. Jurai says, gentlemen, public love your broadcasting show. God bless you. Well, yes, we love broadcasting. And as we said, James, have we not, that we will form the backbone of the Khalistan Broadcasting Corporation, the KBC, when it is established in the foreseeable future.
My only concern is the gentleman with a question mark on the top of that statement.
Gentlemen, we're no gentlemen. And Curios finishes off today's show with a final comment by saying, India has turned into an authoritarian state, no doubt. It has indeed. How long do they think they can carry on like this? Well, not for long, probably. But as you rightly said, the drumbeat for Khalistan will only get louder. Yes, it will indeed, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And that's what we hope to do here as well, is add our beat to that drum.
Indeed, and I'm delighted to say that drum is beating louder. Support is rallying around the world. The diaspora is clearly showing its support for the whole concept, and no doubt it is growing within the Punjab itself as well, as we often report. But unfortunately, we must draw things to a close for another day there for Perspectives. But thank you so much for all your support. Thank you for all the comments. Do keep them coming in. Please do let us know your perspectives on any issues that we raise in the show. And of course, bring up any issues that you would like us to talk about, to give our perspectives on. Don't forget, you can, of course, email us directly at message@satlogetv.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention that you don't want to put in the public domain. But in the meantime, we will draw things to a close. It is a goodbye from me, and it is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
Thanks so much for watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.